Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, having some technical failure to launch here.
I got the volume turned down, so.
Hey. Alrighty, let's play. See if they have a zombies edition coming out.
Cool. I figured they'd do an update with zombies. Probably have like some new maps or something. For a new zombies campaign. Which means everybody will be starting fresh. They should be on an equal footing with everybody. So outside of weapons and attachments. They are changing things around.
Just a lot.
Like, are weapons going to carry over? Like your upgrades and stuff?
It says it will. Like when the update is finally, like that's one of the things that doesn't work right now. Is the carryover.
Gotcha.
Oh yeah, see perks. Assassin, engineer. I like gung ho. Quartermaster's alright.
Interesting.
Hello there.
I literally
Hello.
I've only played a little bit of Call of Duty. It's okay. I miss, like, the last time I was really into Call of Duty was the original Modern Warfare 2. Back in, like, 2000 something or other. I don't even remember how long ago. It was that long ago.
I got Diogenes and Ptolemy.
Nice.
So far.
Diogenes is probably my favorite of the philosophers.
Yeah, but there's just not that much about the man.
What are you talking about? There's tons of stories.
Yeah, but like, it's hard to explain.
My favorite is when he's in the city of Athens. At least I think it's Athens. Don't quote me on that part. But it's in a city. It's being besieged. It's under attack. And he gets up on a box and starts barking like a dog.
No, you have your stories mixed up.
You know what?
Yes.
Alright. He's doing something.
I don't remember the name of the town.
And somebody turns to him and goes, "What are you doing?"
He was rolling a barrel up and down a hill naked, screaming or yodeling or whatever.
Oh, right.
And the man stopped him because the city was being laid waste by people.
Yeah.
Being ransacked and shit.
And his answer was fucking glorious.
Yeah, he said, "I'm just doing what everybody else is doing, just in a different way." Or so, yeah, something like that.
Basically pointing out that, like,
I'm being as helpful as everyone else.
Yeah.
That's what it was. I'm being just as helpful as everyone else.
Exactly.
Ah, I forgot to click the button. I've been sitting here waiting, and like, it's all me.
Nice. Well played. I keep thinking I might fire up the switch while you're playing this. Like,
Go
watch
for
you
it.
play.
As long as you're here with me, actually spending time with me.
I don't even feel well enough to go out there. That's how sick I am. I don't even feel well enough to go out there.
You don't feel good enough to close the door either. Boom. But it's good to have a dog in here. So there's only one viewer. That's you.
It's weird. You're regular.
Yeah, this is kind of a bad time.
We've taken the lead. Stay on target.
Especially Call
Team
of Duty.
deathmatch. Engagement windows open. Go, go, go!
Oh yeah, look what I can do now.
Hostiles reclaim the lead.
It's much easier to have 3 weapon choices instead of 2.
Nice. Make for more interesting loadouts.
Ah, he just knifed me.
You got nipped
I got kidnapped.
right in the fucking head.
Excuse me, sir. I think that people's back at me. Again, see, they always get me from behind.
You got taken out by the Burger King.
Claim the advantage. Now hold it. We've given up the lead. The lead is on.
Ah, on the floor. The old on the floor trick.
I see people go down and get up faster too. Like you can go from prone to not prone very quickly.
Yes, it is much easier.
They've taken the lead.
I didn't stand a chance. See if I can kill anybody with a shotty.
Target appears hostile.
We're winning.
It's a little
Keep it
slow
up.
on the ADS.
A little bit. But it's a shotgun, so hip firing gets
Friendly
pretty
target.
reasonable. Reload.
Smoked.
Ah, god dang it. I stepped on my own fucking grenade. Ah, goodness me.
That was pretty epic there, guys.
Your assault tank has been destroyed.
Frag out. That was
fuck? That was a quick reload point.
Mm-hmm. I have noticed the spawns seem to come a lot faster.
Front clear.
They do. I'm trying to push the limits of the graphics too.
This TV is really good.
I just jumped down a freaking elevator shaft.
And that killed you?
Yes.
Neutralized.
Yes, watch.
Oh yeah, I see why. It's a little girl. It's a pretty detailed map, actually. Ooh, what does that do?
Nothing.
Why? It's interactable.
Is it?
Looks like it. Turned on security. Okay. Didn't do anything. There was another interactable back there.
God damn it. Alright, so I don't think the shotgun's this map.
No.
Let's try that.
Honestly, I don't know handle it. Particularly. Particularly good.
They got two within that.
Mm-hmm.
Claim the advantage. Now hold it.
Shooting.
Whoops.
You're falling behind, Crimson.
That's a kill.
So, yeah.
You're supposed to be
Dodge
really
needs it
safe.
is.
Act like it. We're winning. Keep it that way.
If I can even see them coming.
We've given up the lead.
I mean, he was shooting before he even came around the corner. That's what I was telling you about the other night cornering.
Taking the lead. Stay on task.
Yeah,
Getting
Enemies
a
at a
shot
jump.
right there.
Proceed to extract Crimson.
I tried to find you on Discord and I couldn't find you. Okay.
Who's it? You're not on the Discord right now. That's why.
No, it's not that.
Do you know this person? Oh.
Hello? Here you go. I got 14 eliminations.
Nice. The ratio usually work. Domination.
Securing C.
Taking objective.
We control Zone C.
At what T? Their name.
We're taking C. Securing B.
This shit shows, right?
Son of. We lost Charlie. Taking B.
Right here.
Locking down
Locking on the
Charlie.
objective.
Bravo
Keep them up.
down. Zone Charlie locked down.
Alright.
Enemy
Give me
RCXD
what's
detected.
up.
Take it out.
Deploying RCXD.
Losing B.
Oh, you're defending C?
No, I'm spectating.
Oh.
Losing
I got
Bravo.
eliminated already. Now I get to come back, I think. Okay.
No, you had to hit a button to come back.
I did hit buttons. Oh, well, start again. I can't reply to my Discord at the moment. I'm not good at multitasking yet.
Oh, where's it? I'm getting a frame or something. Wow, you weren't kidding about these loads being a little,
It's actually running a little bit smoother than it was earlier.
good.
So I averaged 14 eliminations during this.
Hard point. Secure the objective. Hard point is active. Hard point is secured.
You're not gonna go help secure the hard point.
No.
Rest easy.
Nice.
And yes, I know how to post them.
Hostiles have captured the hard point. Hard point locked down.
But they're coming from behind me.
Hard point located.
Oh. that didn't.
Hostiles have the hard point. Hard point active.
Capture it. We're like right there.
Hard point is secured.
Little frag over the rock.
Hostiles have captured the hard point.
Oh, that was a
That was a
headshot.
headshot for sure.
Assault back here.
Hard point identified. Hard point locked down. Hard point is active. Hostiles have the hard point. Hard point is secured. Hostiles have captured the hard point.
That bitch just took me out with the fucking butt of his gun.
So,
Hard point locked down. Hard point located.
Target is hit.
Hard point active. Hard point is secured.
Eyes on it.
Lead dive. Hostiles have the hard point. Hard point locked down. Come on, you're losing this fight. Hard point is secured. Nice. We're pulling ahead. Hard point identified.
Pop your head back out that window.
Hard point is active. Stack up. Requesting recon overhead. Hostiles have captured the hard point. Hard point locked down.
Damn, I'm getting all tactical and getting shot up and shit, so fuck it. I'm just gonna go wild. I got lit the fuck up.
Hostiles have captured the hard point.
fucking app sucks, man. If I navigate away from even half a second, it's like, no, fuck you.
Hardpoint locked down.
Twitch, fix your fucking app.
Hardpoint active. Hostiles have the hardpoint. This shit ain't working. We've lost the advantage.
Yeah, I can't check my Discord, so we're gonna have to wait.
Hardpoint identified.
Yeah,
Ramming
so I
some
put them in. I have a special room in hell for them. I mean, special room for them.
Hardpoint is active.
They talk
Hardpoint
to
is
each other.
secured.
That was a bad guy in front of you the whole time.
I was trying to reload my weapon. That's what I was doing.
Should have thrown a frag out.
Something you want to say, soldier?
Hostiles have captured the hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint located. Hostiles have the hardpoint. Hostile scout pulse in your AO.
Motherfucker.
Hardpoint is secure. Hardpoint active. Hostiles have captured the hardpoint.
Now I got the wrong fucking guy. Aimed at the wrong guy.
That'll happen.
Sit down, buddy.
Hardpoint locked down. Hostiles have the hardpoint. Hardpoint is secure. Hostiles have captured the hardpoint. Hardpoint locked down. Hardpoint identified. Got me eyes in the sky. Hardpoint is active. Hostiles have the hardpoint. Hardpoint is secure. We got the lead. Now hold it. Hostiles have captured the hardpoint.
You got some out of ammo.
Hardpoint locked down. Hostiles have the hardpoint. Hardpoint is secure. Hardpoint located. Hardpoint active. Hostiles have captured the hardpoint.
I feel like you guys didn't lose.
You've fallen behind. You gonna let a bunch of company assholes beat you? Fight back, damn it!
Yeah, probably.
Bad guy down.
identified.
Damn it.
Hardpoint set.
It would have been cool.
Hostile at the hardpoint. RTB, Black Ops. We need to have a fucking conversation.
That was close though. I'm sorry. When you get that downloaded, let me know. And we will.
Yeah, no.
Uh,
Not down.
thank you for the tab. I'll check out the app.
I know you do.
Why you say shit? Say how it's. Alright, here we go. Starting
I don't get how it's in the chat.
Starting to do this thing.
Viewer. It's been the snake black of headwear and coach. There's something that's. Oh yeah, I forgot Black Ops has like a whole alternate history thing going on too, I think.
Oh, disconnect from the Wi-Fi.
Hmm?
It's counting the IP address.
Crimson, assist me on this
I see
OBJ.
how it works, but okay.
Domination. Remind the fugitives that actions have consequences. Bravo lost. Securing B. We're losing Alpha.
Oh, no, that's what I was told.
Taking C.
Yeah, far be it from me to
Securing C.
say, oh, I
Controlling Bravo.
I've got this.
way to do that.
Zone B secured.
Mother fricker.
They're taking C.
Objective
Secure.
capture on the
I'm
way.
taking this one.
We're losing Charlie.
Taking out.
Taking B.
Getting active. Not this time,
Alpha
you son
secure.
of a bitch.
And on my left. Precognition.
Controlling Bravo.
And on the left again. Yes, ma'am.
Be ready.
Well, I knew they were coming from this way.
Oh, they finally got you.
Initiate objective control.
Task counter
Secure
UAV
it.
above.
Watch my ass.
Taking Bravo underway. Bravo zone secure.
I jumped right on that grenade.
We're losing Alpha. Losing B.
Frank.
Kraus authorizing UAV mission.
Losing Bravo.
This is the first time seeing Charlie.
Knocking down Charlie.
Capturing the objective.
Losing B. All locations locked down. Dig in and hold them. Losing A.
God bless. So I have to go back and do that in two?
Taking B. They're taking C.
Nope, I guess not. I'm tired now.
Daily outside. UAV mission.
Beginning capture.
Taking Bravo underway. We're losing
Hold
Alpha.
the fucking phone. What'd you just say to me?
Taking B. Task counter UAV above. All objectives locked
I'm just
down.
gonna go in
Hold
here,
the enemy
alright.
back. We're losing Charlie.
All them
TACOM Kraus
grenades.
requesting
Get me with the
UAV.
freaking grenades.
Every time.
We're laying on their stomach, but they can't get me head
Losing
on.
Bravo.
Catch me
No,
eyes in
you
the
don't see
sky.
this problem.
Enemy RCXD detected. They're taking C. Losing A. Losing B.
Anyway, that was fun.
We're losing Charlie.
Operating RCS.
We lost Charlie. Losing Bravo.
RCXD spotted.
We're losing all zones.
Yours.
Lost A.
Frank clear.
Losing B.
Objective
Securing
capture
Charlie.
underway. Secure it. Watch my
Losing
ass.
Bravo. We control Zone C. Taking Alpha. TACOM, requesting recon overhead.
You got this.
Losing B. Taking A. Losing Bravo. Securing Alpha. TACOM, Bailey requesting UAV. Securing Zone A.
Secure it.
Taking
Watch
A.
my ass.
Authorizing UAV ECM mission. TACOM requesting recon
Yeah.
overhead.
Securing
Yeah,
Alpha.
yeah.
Slide up.
Losing B. Taking Alpha. They're taking C. All locations secured. Hold your position. Losing Bravo. Losing B. We're losing Charlie.
Head out of your ass. Check your
TACOM, South requesting COAV.
Right yourself.
Yes.
I saw it.
Give me eyes on the sky. We're
Oh, I
losing
guess
Alpha.
that I can't be behind that.
Not this time.
Losing Bravo. They're taking C. We're losing Charlie.
Well, that was fun.
Losing A. They're taking all zones. They're taking C. Authorizing CUAV ECM mission. We're losing Alpha. We lost Alpha. Securing Zone A. We're ahead, but stay alert. Marshall's people are no fools. Losing B.
Ceasefire. Friendly target.
Losing Bravo.
So that game's over. Y'all won.
We lost B. We're losing Charlie. Taking Alpha.
And
You made it look easy, Crimson.
They have the best planes though.
oh,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Jesus. 8. Yeah, I don't know. But whatever.
man, they could be that good.
See how terrible I did.
Can't have done that bad.
See?
It's just a little glitchy.
Now it's really stuck to show you.
Yeah, well, people are getting on
Ooh,
after
there's
this.
a double time. I can go faster now.
That's
And I get a wild card called over 2.
that's cool. Oh, any of that means. I get the going faster part though.
I didn't get to change it.
Back out of a match. So you
I
can-
will after I was watching it. I'm knocking out stuff.
Excuse me. Kill it. It's a flying one.
Yeah. No, double time. What is this one?
Increased duration of tactical sprint. More damage, less accurate.
I want to put a fork save on this.
Set single shot mode and have like a makeshift sniper rifle. You want one of these before the last ones are all done?
I guess.
Alright, I'm gonna go grab it.
Did you see it?
Okay, see you. Should I have up the lap on it? Or not very cool right now?
In my party screen.
Hmm. It's still weird. Oh, like party members. Never mind. Yeah, party. Or yeah.
See, I have an auto moderator.
Oh, nice. Surprised I didn't catch the one.
Different type of approach. But now that I'm getting them figured out, it won't be long before they're down to it.
Oh, looks like you're fighting on derelicts.
I think I'm gonna stop streaming early so that my numbers don't get hurt bad.
Under fire. Repeat. HVT under fire. Control. Hostile HVT located. Damn it, we lost the lead. Our HVT's been eliminated. Protect our HVT.
What? I was stabbing that motherfucker.
No, the game has a big glitch in it.
HVT is taking fire. Back to safe. He's done. We took out their HVT. They got our HVT.
Hostile shooter.
Enemy RCXD detected. Friendly HVT on site. Keep them safe. Enemy HVT on site. Take them out. HVT under fire. Repeat. HVT under fire. Our HVT's been eliminated.
I think I was the HVT.
Protect our HVT. HVT is taking fire. Keep the package safe.
Driving RCXD.
Stay alert, Black Ops. We got a mole. Enemy HVT is down. Hostile HVT located. Hostile RCXD in your AO. They got our HVT.
Yo, check your fire. You're going down.
Friendly HVT on site. We took out their HVT.
We gotta try new tactics on
Enemy HVT on site. Take them out.
You do play very non-conventional for a lot of people.
except for that guy.
HVT under fire. Repeat. HVT under fire. Our HVT's been eliminated.
Wow.
You're our HVT. Stay alert.
Yeah, like they're teamed up and they're like coming after me. You watch. I'll see another squad of them. They'll all be together. They'll all be coming straight at me.
Bringing in recon.
I'm HVT.
You are the high value target. That's why they're coming after you. Your job is to go hide and stay safe.
Get him down.
Well, I didn't know that I was HVT.
So you're not in the
Enemy HVT is down.
I'm glad you get that.
Hostile HVT located.
Saw it pop up right
Protect
there.
our HVT. HVT is taking fire. Keep the package safe. All operators to your nearest CCP. We just got our asses handed to us.
Nice.
Too bad the beta doesn't include zombies.
Right.
Surprised Trevor's not online.
He's with this kid.
No. That's a dope looking weapon.
Thank you.
I like that logo.
I have that one. I have this one.
Yeah, that's not as cool.
I have these one. I have this one.
I love that one.
I want to play with my new stuff, so I'm switching over to not beta.
MW3.
Yeah.
I got fixing to crawl up on the bed here. What?
Alright, everybody. That has been our stream. Thank y'all for watching.